I do want to touch on that God's holiness aspect.
Yeah.
Because like Chris has been talking about that, and it's like Chris Hoken, one of our favorite pastors, he says that one of the lost traits of God, it's not that God lost the trait, it's that our generation lost the trait. And you see it a lot more in the Muslim religion and other countries that hold weight more to Jesus' name. It's like, we think of God, the lover, or Jesus, the forgiver, or the redeemer, the healer. But God's holiness, like his power, wrath, and holiness. I'm going to speak specifically on his holiness. Go ahead, before I say what I'm going to say, can you explain to him what the word holy means? Because that's like a buzzword that most people don't know.
Yeah, let me see if I can remember exactly the way Chris said it, because that was like the best version I've heard of.
So start at to be set apart. I can explain it.
Yeah, you want to explain it?
Okay, so what most people will say is holy means to be set apart. Okay, from what? In this case, it's to be set apart from humans. God and humans are set apart. But what does that mean? I'm set apart from my dog. Isaiah, he was a prophet in the Bible, and his whole life was dedicated to God. Like us, he was not perfect, but probably in terms of preaching the gospel, probably a lot better than me and you and other people. Like, this guy has 66 chapters in the Bible.
He was the prophet.
He was the prophet. And at one point, he really admired one king. I don't remember what.
Uzziah.
King Uzziah. And King Uzziah had died. And Prophet Isaiah felt that that was not fair. He felt like, God, I'm your servant. I know King Uzziah. I think King Uzziah is a good person. Why would you kill him? That's ridiculous. And he was kind of mad with God. And in one of the only moments in the whole Bible, there's like, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 where you get any glimpse of what God in heaven and his glory is like. This is one of the moments. And
Isaiah has a vision.
Isaiah has a vision, and he gets dropped into the throne room of God. And the way I like to put it, there's an analogy. Imagine you get subbed into an NBA basketball game. And like, you think you're good at basketball. I think I'm good at basketball. I'm like 5'10". I play a decent amount. I can hold a game and pick up basketball. But imagine I get subbed into an NBA basketball game, and everyone's 6'3". They all play basketball their whole life, and they're all swatting every shot. They're stealing the ball from me. And like,
Minyama.
Within a minute, I'm embarrassed. I'm like, dude, I am not good at basketball. I thought it was good, but now I'm playing with the pros. I'm pathetic at basketball. Like, and that's kind of what happens with Isaiah. So he has this vision where he gets dropped into the throne room of God. Upon entering, immediately he goes, woe to me, kill me. I am not worthy to be here. He goes, my mouth is disgusting. This guy preached the gospel his whole life. He's like God's prophet. He goes, my mouth is dirty. I live amongst people with dirty mouths. I deserve to die. Go ahead and end my life. That's what he just said.
Yeah, people would come to him to hear what God had to say. Because it was crazy. And so in the seraphim, they would fly there, 6 wings, 2 covering their eyes, 2 covering their feet, and 2 of them flying, just crying out, holy, 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 the whole earth is full of his glory.
Yeah, so Isaiah 6:2, right after Isaiah goes, I deserve to die. So it's not that he landed in there and God goes, you deserve to die. God didn't tell him anything. He knew the same way if I got subbed into an NBA basketball game, the players aren't telling me, get off the court. It's like, I just know by perspective and comparison, I know that I'm not a good basketball player. When he comes in this room, even though he dedicated his whole life to God, he goes, I am not holy. Like, I'm a sinner and I live among sinners, and he knows. And then it says, attending him were mighty seraphim. Seraphim are like angels. I think they have wings, and angels technically don't have wings. That's a whole different thing. But so they're attending him. They're seraphim, 6 wings with 2 wings that cover their face. So they cover their face, which holds their eyes. They say, I'm flying here 24/7, serving the God of the universe, and I have to cover my eyes because I'm not even worthy to look at him. And these aren't human sinners. These are his 6 seraphim that are attending him, and they're not worthy to look at him. And then they cover their feet because your feet represented what people would look at you for, like I forgot how Chris put it, but it's like how you walk, where you've been. And they said, God is not worthy to look at me either. Not only am I not worthy to look at him, he's not worthy to look at, not that he's not worthy, I'm not worthy for him to be looked at.
Yeah.
And then 2, they would just use the other 2 wings to fly 24/7. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. And
The whole earth is full of his glory.
that's like, just thinking about God from that perspective, it was very, very humbling. That I don't even know what I have to say about it other than just like thinking of God. Like we think of God like Jesus, the Jewish man who walked around and died on the cross for us, and that is God's glory, but God's holiness, like just I don't know. That's like,
It just gives you a new perspective of like, it's like respect. Like the way that I've heard like fear God, like that whole thing where it's like, oh, we have to fear God. We have to have awe of God. Like yes, I think we should fear God, but I don't think it's as much in the way of like, I'm so scared of God. The way I've heard it put is like to imagine life without God, like that.
Yeah.
Like fearing God is like fearing what life would be like without him, where it's like, if he wasn't here, if I was completely set apart from him,
yeah,
it's like to think that I'm a terrible person already. I suck.
Yeah.
I sin every single day. I mess up every single day. I do all of this stuff. I don't deserve anything. And it's like, just to sit there and think of that type of stuff where it's like, it's that. And in Amos, it talks about like he touches the earth and it melts. And in Micah, it says he touches the mountains and they melt like candle wax. And it's just like, dude, my God, my best friend,
yeah,
someone that I can just, God, how you doing? At any moment, at any time.
yeah,
My best friend
Yeah.
isn't just someone who's like, oh yeah, it's God. It's someone that's like, dude, this man just touches the earth and it melts.
yeah,
It's like in Exodus 33, it talks about how Moses was like, Lord, show me your glory. And then that's when like God was like, if you were to see my glory, you would die.
yeah.
Like he wears a veil. He wears a veil
and then
in that. So that, and if he were to remove that veil, Moses would die.
what he tells Moses to do is he goes, I want you to turn around and I'm going to run past this place. Or he says, I'm going to put my presence in this place. And after I've left, I want you to turn around and look where I used to be.
Yeah.
And then when Moses turns around to see where God used to be, the presence of God, not where he is, like he was just there, he falls to his knees and he's like, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. Because just the presence of where God used to be was enough for him to fall to his knees and immediately realize how holy God was and how unworthy he is.
Yeah. And it's like, to think about that is just so crazy. And that put a new perspective of like who God is for me. And it's like when Moses came out of that time with God, people couldn't look at him because he was in the presence of God. He was shining from just being in the presence of God.
Yeah.
Which is like crazy to think about. And it's like, of course, we probably won't get there to where like, oh, we're shining. But it's like, you can, when you look at someone and you see how stoked and joyful and happy and just childlike, like, oh yes, life is so good. I guarantee you they are probably a Christian.
Yeah. That's a beautiful way of putting it. Like over and over again, like God says we are to be the light of the world. And I think there's one verse, I wish I could remember where it's from, but it's like Christians are like a city on top of a mountain. It's like people have always seen like cities on mountains. Like you can't not notice them. It's like a friggin' city that's how we're supposed to be. We're like supposed to be like that light in this world.
Yeah. Like we should be noticeably different. That's the thing, is it's like, you are who you hang out with. Jesus came down to give us a path of how to live, but also like to save us. But it's also like, there was one of my friends said this, and it was like, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is fire. He said, Jesus didn't die on the cross so that we don't have to. He died on the cross to teach us how. And it's like not in the same way of like, oh, like I'm going to go die on the cross and go through but it's like the way of giving up my life.
Yeah.
Even if I don't want to, the way of giving up my life. Where like Jesus died on the cross, giving up everything for you.
Yeah.
And as a Christian, our job is to my life is no longer mine, mine is yours.
Yeah.
Teaching us how to pick up our cross daily and die on the cross daily. You know?
I mean, that's an interesting way of putting it because like we can't forgive sins.
No, absolutely not. But that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, but it's like
Yeah.
the idea that, like our life, we owe God everything, and although we can never pay Him back, we ought to try.
Yeah.
And again, you're not saved. There's no work that you can do to get you into heaven.
Yeah.
But this is what I tell people a lot. It's like, there's a classic example of the thief on the cross. He didn't do anything. He didn't go to church. He never took communion, never got baptized. And then he goes, Jesus, when you die, remember me in your kingdom. Luke 24:43, Jesus says, I promise today you will be with me in paradise. So we know that you can go to heaven without doing anything. But the point, and this is an analogy that I've come and I've used on a lot of people, is like, if I was about to shoot you, Asher, with a gun, and your dad, your physical dad, jumps in front of the bullet, and I shoot him instead, and he's like dying in your arms, and you go, you go, Dad, like, thank you so much, I love you, like, I love you, and he says one thing to you. It's a little bit weird. He goes, Asher, I want you to never eat an Oreo again, and he dies. Now let me ask you a question. Would you ever eat an Oreo again?
No.
No. Okay. So you wouldn't, even though that's a completely random command, you wouldn't eat an Oreo again because you loved your dad and he died for you. Now, you don't stop eating Oreos because he's gonna die for you. No, he already died for you. You already know. It's not like you were just not eating Oreos your whole life and then you're like, my dad's gonna die for this. It's like he died and he made a request, and because you love him and believe it happened, you will stop doing it. And it goes, well, if I ask you right now, why do you still eat Oreos? And I don't even know if you do or not, but it's because you don't believe that story I just told you. And it's like with Jesus, it's the same thing. It's not, you are not saved by any work you do. But if you really believe Jesus died for you, then you probably try to live the way he told you to. And it's like, again, like, this is not works religion. There's nothing you can do to save yourself. But Romans 10:9 says, if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord, 2.2 billion people are Christian.
Well, it's not just confess it in your mouth, because a lot of people do that, yeah.
2.2 billion people are Christian, which means 2.2 billion people would probably confess with their mouth that Jesus is Lord. It says if you confess in your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead. And that second part, and I don't know, that's a big deal. What is believing? It's not a work, but if you really believe something, works would probably result from it.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is it's like, to think 2.2 billion people believe in Christian, like, or that say they're Christian. Yeah, say they're Christian. What the definition of that is they go to church once a month.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like just going to church once a month. And then the amount of Christians that go to church once a month that read their Bible at least once a week, I believe, is 22%.
Wow.
Are only getting in their word. So only 22% of people. The way that I think about that is like, say Lucas, for example.
Yeah.
Or Blake. They should know Blake. And
yeah.
But Blake, say I know Blake and you don't know Blake.
Yeah.
But I tell you all about Blake, and I tell you his best qualities and his worst qualities and his rights and everything that he's ever done in his life. I tell you his entire story. When you meet Blake, you're going to think you already knew Blake.
Yeah.
But you don't know Blake.
Yeah.
And that's what I believe, that, like, dude, the 2.2 billion people, the people who are only going to church once a month, who aren't reading their Bible, the 22% of people who are opening their Bible only once a week even. That's, like, hard. But it's just like, because it's like, if you think about it, if I go to the gym once a week, am I going to see any progress? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
It's like, I have to do this consistently, and if I go to church, I'm only hearing about God. You're hearing about my relationship with Blake.
Yeah.
You don't know Blake, but you think you know Blake. Then when you meet Blake, it's different because that's you actually growing a relationship with him. And I feel like that's the same thing with Christianity and going to church, where it's like, yes, you can hear a pastor preaching to you a ton, and you can hear him say all these things about God and what he's learned about God. But that's just knowing of God, and that's knowing things about him, but you don't actually know him.
Dude, that's such a good way of putting it. Something else that came to my mind as you were saying that is like, why would you tell me about Blake? It's like, you would only tell me about Blake unless there's two reasons. You're gossiping and you don't like him, or you love him. Because we talk about the things we love. Yep. You know that I'm a podcaster. You're on my podcast. But before you were on my podcast, I probably told you about my podcast many times. and I told you about Creator Camp, just because I love Creator Camp, and I told you about my friends, and I told you about Chris, and I've told you about all the things I love. If someone asked me as a lukewarm Christian, let's jump back to those days, and I said, I love Jesus, but then I didn't tell anyone about him, it's like you tell people about the things you love. And it's like...
Yeah, that's the thing. It's just an overflow. It's like,